going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to look into the free agency market and what free agents are still out there that the New York Giants may be interested in. A lot of you guys have asked me to do a video like this, kind of, really diving into the offensive line, but I figured I'd do all the positions and really talk about 4 or 5 prospects that I think the Giants could potentially have their eyes on. Before I continue with the video, any ideas that you guys would like to see me do a video on, being that it's kind of the slower time of the offseason? I have a bunch of ideas I've got planned out. I'm still trying to give you guys daily content, but I don't want it to get too watered down. So here and there, I'll take a break. But this is one topic that I really wanted to talk about that a lot of guys have expressed interest in. Of course, if you look at the New York Giants cap situation right now, it's not there. I think we got about $2.5 million in cap space. But of course, we all know if the Giants want to make move to sign somebody, they absolutely can. We saw it throughout free agency this entire process, whether it's backloading salaries, whether it's making cuts. And right now, I think they've got about 90 guys signed under contract. That's why they were only able to bring in 3 undrafted free agents. So they may not sign somebody today or tomorrow. It may be later in the process. And after June 1st, expect for there to be a lot more cuts after the June 1st cuts, when they could kind of divvy up the money in certain ways. So a lot of people have talked about that as well. And this offseason, unlike any other, there's going to be a lot more free agents to potentially choose from. And there's still a lot of big names out there that the New York Giants could potentially be interested in to fill in some holes on this roster. When you look around on the roster outside of the offensive line, which we're of course going to talk about, there's not a ton of holes on this team. I don't think you're going to be signing a free agent quarterback. You already did that. Could you sign a free agent running back? Sure. But the way I look at it is most of the free agent running backs out there, kind of like last year with Devontae Freeman, they're probably going to wait to see if jobs develop in training camp or early in the season if somebody goes down with an injury. I don't think any name running back is going to be rushing to sign with the New York Giants, knowing that they're going to be 3rd or 4th on the depth chart. So I don't see us signing a running back at this point in time. The wide receiver position, I think we're locked and loaded. I think we're very deep there. And then if you go on the defensive side of the football, I could absolutely see us signing a middle linebacker. I'm not going to go in depth with some of the players because none of them really blow me away. And the Giants really, they don't seem to prioritize that position. Of course, we have Martinez, and then we've kind of got a bunch of guys that could play that second spot, including Jabril Peppers in the box, along with Tate Crowder, Devontae Downs, and Reggie Ragland. But guys like B.J. Goodson, a former New York Giant, still there. Reuben Foster, Quan Alexander, Avery Williamson. Those are potentially some guys that the New York Giants could look to bring in. I just don't think they'll be looking at that position. The corner and safety, I'm not worried about at all. But again, if there's injuries in training camp, you never know. They could absolutely elect to go out there and sign somebody else. Last year, there was an injury to our roster, and that is probably the major reason why we went out there and signed Logan Ryan late in the process. McKinney got hurt right before the season started. We went out there, we signed Logan Ryan. We also had that provision on Marcus Golden's contract. So the Giants have done this before where they've signed free agents late into the process. The other thing I'll say is this team with Gettleman and Judge last year specifically seemed to be very proactive in season, trying to get as good of a product as they possibly could. Preseason, they traded for Isaac Yiadom. They signed Logan Ryan. They made a plethora of moves within season, specifically at the running back spot after Saquon Barkley went down. So I think if the New York Giants see a need on this roster, I think they will go out there and try to bring somebody in, whether it be to start or to provide as depth. The question is, will they see that need? And we're going to start with the offensive line, being that is right now probably the glaring hole on this roster. A lot of people aren't super comfortable with the starters, even though the New York Giants may be. Are there still some guys out there, even if they're not going to play as starters, that can come in and be depth? I'm not going to really jump into the depth guys in this video. The 2 guys I'm going to mention I think would at least compete to be starters, if not be starters, if the New York Giants elected to go that route. Now, when you look at the list, I think this was Pro Football Network. According to them, these are the top available 2021 NFL free agent offensive linemen remaining. Now, the majority of these guys are tackles. I think the 3 interior linemen here that they could have interested in if they're not going tackle, and I really don't think we're going to go tackle. Of course, we have Thomas, we have Barrett, and we have Nate Solder. Of course, maybe a guy like Eric Fisher, maybe. But I don't see it. Mitchell Schwartz. I think if they're going to sign somebody, it'll be an interior offensive lineman. And the 2 names on that list that jump out to me are number 8 and number 6. And we're going to start with number 6, and that's Austin Ryder. Austin Ryder was not cut. He was a free agent that the Chiefs let go. He's a former 7th-round pick. He's still relatively young. He's 29 years old. He's known to be a very strong run blocker. He's a center. Now, if you were to sign Austin Ryder, who I don't know what his market is going to be, but if you were to sign him, more than likely you would shift Gates over to the guard. I don't think Ryder would sign here to play a position he's never played before at the pro level. He would sooner sign on with somebody else to either be a depth center or a starting center. So I think if you were to sign Austin Ryder, you would shift Gates over to the guard, and then either Lemieux or Hernandez would be on the bench. Ryder last year actually played pretty well for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a 71 PFF grade and 78 in pass protection, something that the New York Giants desperately need on the interior portion of that offensive line. Did not allow a sack the entire season. He's still only 29 years old, doesn't have a rich injury history, so he's a guy maybe you want to keep your eye on who could provide as a late free agent acquisition for the New York Giants. Of course, I don't know how much his market's going to be, how much he's going to command, but I'm sure if the New York Giants really wanted him and they felt like it was a big need, they could go out there and elect to sign a guy like Austin Ryder. So keep your eye out on him. The other guy we're going to talk about is the obvious name that you've heard time and time again, and like I said earlier, number 8 on that list, Trey Turner. Turner is a former Gettleman guy. Gettleman drafted him well with the Carolina Panthers in the 3rd round in 2014. And Gettleman, like I've said, has had a track record of finding value at that position specifically. Darrell Williams and Trey Turner both went on to be Pro Bowlers for the Carolina Panthers, and they were both late-round picks. I think Williams was a 5th or a 6th-round pick. Trey Turner, a 3rd-round pick, and is a 5-time Pro Bowler in the NFL from 2014 to 2019. Suffered a groin injury, which in 2020 at least partially explains his regression in play, and he was horrible. Now, keep in mind, he played on a really bad offensive line, and maybe with a change of scenery, maybe he's more healthy, could bounce back, and I'm sure the New York Giants will at least entertain bringing him in if the price matches up. His PFF grade last year, though, was 34. He's still relatively young. He's only 28 years old, and with his connections to Gettleman, he could make sense. He only played 9 games last year due to that injury. His first 4 years in the league, Trey Turner only surrendered 3 sacks throughout his first 4 seasons. He only surrendered 3 sacks. Over the last 3 years, so one last year, he surrendered 10. So he's definitely not the same player he once was, and I think as Giants fans, you have to realize that, and that's why you're probably going to be able to get him at a much lesser rate than some may be anticipating. And we'll see if the New York Giants show any interest there, could instantly step in and at least compete to being starting guard for the New York Giants. But really on that list, out of those 8 names, those are the 2 offensive linemen that I would have interest in if I was Dave Gettleman of the New York Giants. The next prospect I wanted to bring up is a guy I've talked about in the past, and maybe you're not really looking at this as a strong possibility, being that we drafted 2 edge rushers in this year's draft. But I think if you look at this position, it's still a major question mark. Like, you don't know what these rookies are going to be when they come in. You don't know how well Lorenzo Carter is going to respond from the injury, and you don't know the same for O'Shane Ximines. We definitely are going into this year at least thinking we don't have a definitive number 1 edge rusher, and a guy like Justin Houston, who's actually 6th on this list, could very well be a very good fit for the New York Giants, again, depending on the price. Justin Houston is 32 years old, and I think that is the primary reason why he has not gotten a contract with anybody. I don't think teams are rushing to the table with a condensed market to give a 32-year-old edge rusher, no matter how good he may be, a multi-year contract. Now, maybe the Giants could sign him to a 2-year deal for $6 or $7 million a year and find a way to get it done. I think he'd be a great fit for the New York Giants. If you look at the highest pass rush win rate, last year when he was 31 years old, he was 6th in the entire NFL. And you look at some of the other names on this list, I mean, that's pretty good company. TJ Watt's number 1, Myles Garrett, Brian Burns, Joey Bosa, Chase Young, JJ Watt, DeMarcus Lawrence. So you're talking about some pretty good company, and you're talking about a guy that has still been very productive in the NFL, and I think due to his age, maybe a bargain basement type guy. He's a guy that I talked about in my edge rusher free agent video before free agency started that I really had my eye on. He still has not been signed. He's actually very durable. He's played the complete season each of the last 2 years. He's started all 32 games. He has experience playing both on the defensive line and as a stand-up outside linebacker. The last 2 years he's played DN. Every year prior to that, he was an outside linebacker. He has 37.5 sacks each over his last 4 seasons and has had no less than 8 during that span, which was last year. over his last 2 years, like I said, he's played all 32 games, and I think Justin Houston is a name that you want to at least monitor, and maybe if he's within the budget, the New York Giants could look into him, much like a guy like Marcus Golden last year. And then the other name I'll throw out there is a big name is Melvin Ingram at that same position. Didn't play a lot last year, only played 7 games. He was forced on the IR twice, which forced him to sit out the rest of the season. Did not have a sack last year, though, well with the Chargers. The one thing I will say, previous to that, he had 7 sacks or more each of the last 5 years prior to that. He is a former first-round pick, and if it's for a very cheap and affordable price, possibly a guy like Melvin Ingram could make sense. And then finally, the last name I wanted to mention, and again, I'm not going to be super excited if we bring him in. We drafted 2 corners, but he did visit with the New York Giants. He has ties to Joe Judge. He has ties to Logan Ryan, and that is Jason McCourty. McCourty, of course, played with the New England Patriots, could provide valuable depth and leadership. He would not see the playing field in terms of his starter. He'd be back up on the depth chart, and I think he would have to realize that coming in. Didn't start a lot for the Patriots last year, and I think he's 34 years old, so we all know he's not the player that he once was. If he was coming here, I think it would be more for leadership and chemistry from within the locker room, and maybe he could help on special teams. But being that he has ties to Logan Ryan and Joe Judge, I think he could make a lot of sense. We're probably not going to get any answers with the free agency market until such time June 1st is out of the way, and we may not even look to sign free agents until we start to get to assess our guys in training camp. But you still want to monitor it and look at it if you're the New York Giants, because inevitably there will more than likely be injuries in training camp. And we'll see if the New York Giants bite on any of these free agents. I would love a guy like Ryder. I would love a guy like Justin Houston. Trey Turner to me seems a little iffy coming off that groin injury, but with his ties to Gettleman, if they give him a physical, maybe the Giants could kick the tires on him. But it sounds to me like the New York Giants are pretty confident in the unit that they have, and I'm sure I'll have a video up on that in the coming days talking about how I feel about that and maybe trying to bring a positive light on that position. But as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.